Hello students, welcome to the massive open online course on money and financial market. In today's lecture, we will focus on the demand for money. In this lecture on demand for money, we have few objectives. These objectives are as follows. In objectives of this today's lecture, we focus on few things. These are very briefly. First, we introduce the concept of money and its functions, and then we will move to how to measure money and what are the different types of measures that we use usually all across the globe. It is not specific to any country, it is used worldwide. And then we move to the brief note on different schools of thought for demand for money. This means how various schools have approached to the problem of defining demand for money. Under these different schools, we may have broadly three categories. One is the classical school, the other is the Keynesian school, and the third one is the post-Keynesian or the monetary school. And since this is a vast area, we are going to divide this demand for money into two parts. One is demand for money 1 and the other is demand for money 2. In demand for money 1, we will focus on the classical concepts and only on the classical concepts of demand for money. And under these classical concepts, we will have equation of exchange. This is essentially, some of us know that it talks about quantity theory of money. This quantity theory of money again has two versions. One is transaction version, the other is income version of this equation of exchange. And this equation of exchange is essentially the major building block of the classical concept of demand for money. And then we move to the Cambridge approach of the quantity theory of money. And at the end of today's lecture, I will try to sum up the whole thing and will tell you what are the takeaways of this lecture. With this backdrop, let me very quickly go to the concepts of money. There is, as we know that there is a kind of thing that is there in the literature which is called IOU. IOU means I owe you something. So it's a kind of paper promise. I'm writing this promise on a piece of paper and I'm giving it to someone when I'm buying this thing. This means I am committed to pay you this money, this much, at a later date. So it is a kind of promissory note. Why I am mentioning about this IOU? Because if we look at the money or paper money of anything, then it is written very clearly on the paper money that I promise to pay the bearer this much of money. So in a sense, this IOU concept and the money or the currency or the paper money, these are same. But before the introduction of this thing, we had the barter system. We had barter system. Barter system also initiated the process of medium of exchange, but barter system itself had some issues, some problems. Problems like, this double coincidence of demand, and problems like, decrease in the productivity of a person, because in barter system I need to produce something which is demanded by someone else. Because of these issues, barter system has been discarded by people and they introduced the money. And essentially, if you look at carefully the function of this money is used as a medium of exchange. So in the barter system, we also did exchange, but barter system, the goods were exchanged. But here, we are exchanging goods through a piece of paper, which is called money. So, and again, this barter trading is very difficult and time consuming, but money permits people to trade at a very lesser cost and also helps increasing the productivity of people. And now, probably there is a very interesting thing that you all know, that money is a matter of functions for a medium, a measure, a standard, a store. The medium part is already explained, but then comes the thing is that medium, a measure and standard. This measure and standard comes under function number 2, where it is the unit of account is associated with money, where pricing of goods and services in currency account or amount is tagged with certain amount of money, be it rupees, be it yen, be it dollar, doesn't matter. Depending on the convenience, various countries use this denomination, use various currencies. And then goods and services are most often exchanged for money. And the medium of exchange functions, it is essentially the medium of exchange functions. So expressing economic values in terms of money is quite natural. However, it has some problem, because if an economy is experiencing huge amount of inflation, it is very difficult to have a stable form of, measuring unit in terms of money. So often what we do, maybe in India we are using rupee as a currency unit, but while comparing with other currencies, we are converting it in terms of dollars. Like in Brazil, where the inflation rate is very high, they may be using their own currency, but they are converting their money in terms of dollar when exchanging with some other currency. So this is one problem, and at the same time, this also calls for the solution of a generalized or accepted form of money. It could be pound, it could be euro, it could be dollar, depending on the strength of that currency. And then comes the store of value. As I said, money is a matter of function sport. The last one is store of value. So when I am using money, I am not storing it. So I have another option. I can store it. So if I store, I am not using it. If I do use, then I am losing something. What I am losing, I will come to that issue later on, but not now. This is one important characteristics of money. So this means that money may be used for two different purposes. One is for exchange, and the other is for something that may yield some return. Whether that return is countable or that return is significant, that is altogether a different question, but that you cannot ignore. So the usefulness of money as a medium of exchange makes it worthy to hold. So people hold money because it is very useful and it helps us to conduct this exchange system or exchange process. Now, as I mentioned in the objective slide, that money may be defined in various ways. The standard ways are, M0, M1, M2, and also we have M3. Often it is replaced by M1, M2, M3, and M4. But the basic idea is almost same. M0 is essentially the monetary base of an economy. The monetary base of an economy means total currency and coins in circulation that is held with the central bank. This is also called high-powered money. And along with that, there is demand deposit. So demand deposit and the currency and notes in circulation that constitute M0. And then comes M1. M1 is essentially M0, means the monetary base of the economy, plus the demand deposit that I mentioned there, and also the demand deposit that is held in the commercial banks by the public. So in case of M0, we had demand deposits that is held by the central bank. Like in India, it is Reserve Bank of India, and this demand deposit comes from the commercial banks. So this relationship is between the central bank and the commercial banks. But under M1, this demand deposit means it is a relationship between commercial banks and the general public. So that also comes under M1. These deposits are also called checking accounts. Don't confuse with the word checking accounts. This check means check. You can write check and draw money if needed. So this M0 and M1 in a sense as together is called the narrow money. And then comes the broad money. Broad money is M2. So if I add savings deposit with unrestricted access that we all have in bank accounts, along with small denomination time deposit means fixed deposits. Mind it is the small denomination time deposit. If we add all these things with M0 and M1, what we get is M2, and then comes M3. I have not written here M3. M3 has one more thing along with M2. M3 has M2 plus larger denomination time deposit, fixed deposit with higher values. So all these things together give us the idea of M3 or the broad money. So M0 and M1, these are narrow money, and M2 and M3, these are called broad money. As I mentioned, that there are three schools of thoughts regarding the demand for money. And these are, as you know, the classical school, the Keynesian school, and the post-Keynesian school. In classical school, the money demand was only a function of income. But in Keynesian school, money demand is not only a function of income, it is essentially also a function of rate of interest, which is not discussed in the classical system. And while discussing this, Keynes had in his mind three other things. One is transaction motive, precautionary motive, and speculative motive that we will discuss in the second lecture. And after that, we have Friedman's idea of money demand function. That is a modification of classical idea of money demand function. Now, And as you know, this classical concept will be focused more in this lecture. This classical idea of demand for money is based on the equation of exchange. Exchange means, in a sense, it is a transaction of goods and services. One thing that must be noted very carefully here, this transaction does not necessarily mean the goods and services produced in this year only. It is very much possible that the goods and services produced in last year or the previous year can also be bought and sold in this year. If it is, then that should also come into the account of this transaction in this year. The main equation of exchange for this classical system or the classical school of money demand function is MB. T is identically equal with PT and T, where M stands for the money supply and the VT is the velocity of money. I will explain a little bit of the velocity of money, and PT is the price level of the transaction or general price level of the goods and services that is being transacted, and T is the total amount of transaction that is taking place in this year, in a particular year. The velocity of money is that if I had rupees 25 now in my pocket, and if I buy something and pay this 25 to someone, and he uses this 25 to buy medicine, and the medicine shop owner uses this rupees 25 to buy fish, then what is happening? I'm paying this to the medicine owner, and the medicine owner is again paying this rupees 25 to the fish owner. Then this means the transaction is being done 3 times, from me to the medicine owner, and then from medicine owner to the fish owner. So this means this velocity is 2 times. 2 transaction is taking place here. So rupees 25 is being transacted 2 times. So this means the velocity is 2. So given this backdrop, we can easily calculate how the velocity of money is going to be given the total amount of money supply that I have in the economy and the total amount of the value of transaction of goods and services that is taking place. One can easily check this from the example, this numerical example. This is self-explanatory, so I am not going to explain this thing here. I'm going to the next part, which is not the transaction version. The previous version was transaction version of equation exchange, but this is the income version. The only thing that has been changed here is that MB is not equal to PT, rather MB is equal to PY, where Y is essentially the income. In classical system, full employment system, which is the strongest classical assumption, the total employment will determine how much income or output is going to be produced in the economy. So if that is the case, then what I have as the quantity theory of money in the equation of exchange system, using the classical idea that V is equal to Py by M, which was in our previous slide PTT by M, but essentially these 2 concepts are same. So one can interchangeably use these 2 concepts, but there is no such very tricky difference between these 2 ideas. And then one can easily check how this Fisherian version of equation of exchange can be used for different periods to determine the price level of the economy. So I'm not going to explain much of these numerical examples because these examples are very clearly written here. So I'm sure you would be able to follow the whole thing if you just go through these points very minutely. The thing that I'm trying to mention here is that the payment habits or payment technology of an economy is going to influence the velocity of money. Just for example, I can say when we are using UPI payment method or using digital payment method, the velocity of money is going to increase. If I look at this equation that MB is equal to PY or MB bar is equal to PY bar, what comes to our mind is that if the money supply or M remains same and the total income of the economy or total output in the economy remains same, that is given by Y. So if M is same and Y is same, then the price level is going to be determined by the velocity of money. Now, as a digital payment system, if the velocity of money goes up, the V goes up, in the equation system, the left-hand side is increasing, so that means in the right-hand side, I must have something to compensate this increase. So the only way out is that the price must increase. So increase in the velocity of money or payment technology of the society, may lead to a sort of inflation in the short run. That is a possibility that can easily be explained by using the quantity theory of money of the classical system. So Fisher argued that the equilibrium level of velocity was determined by such institutional factors like government initiatives, like UPI method, like Paytm, like other issues or other platforms, and could be regarded as fixed for the short run. So in long run, it may be something else, but in short run, this is the Fisherian version argument. But yes, of course, the change in velocity of money may have some effect on the price level in the economy, aggregate price level. Now, this is another example. The bottom line of this example is that if money supply goes up in the economy, the velocity of money remains same, the price level or the P should increase by same amount. I should not say here precisely same amount, but it should ideally be by same proportion as V and Y are given in the system. So the whole thing is essentially boiling down to an equality or identity that will determine the velocity or the price level of the economy. Once I get to know, or once I have full information about the money supply of the economy and the total amount of output or income generated in the economy. And then comes the Cambridge version or Cambridge approach to the quantity theory of money. To get the basic answers, such as how money supply is going to affect the price level, you can use this Cambridge version of the quantity theory of money. This is named after the Cambridge University School. The professors of Cambridge University, they introduced this idea. And noted economists among those Cambridge schools is Alfred Marshall and A.C. Pigou. The Alfred Marshall said that some money will be held because of the convenience that money provides, because without money, you cannot do transaction. So you have to hold some money. You have to have some money in your pocket. That you cannot avoid. So this is required for transaction compared to other stores of value. If you invest this money or if you keep it somewhere else, that is not used for transaction. On the other hand, Pigou noted that currency held in the hand yields no income. So there is a trade-off. So if I have money now, I'm not going to use this money for some investment purpose. So if I use this money for some investment purpose, it is likely that I'm going to get some return from that investment. So when I'm using money for transaction purpose, I'm losing the interest income. So currency held in the hand yields no income. Is it good or bad? If it is so, then why people are keeping this money as the transaction purpose? So the answer is that money will be held only insofar as utility of holding money outweighs the income lost from not investing in productive activity or productive productive forms. So when I have money, the transaction process is smoothened. So smoothening up transaction process is essentially giving us some sort of gain, some sort of satisfaction, or some sort of utility. So the moment this utility or satisfaction outweighs the income that I may lose for not investing the money for some investment, like say buying bonds, buying shares, going for fixed deposit, etc. If that is so, then I will keep this money. I will hold this money for transaction purpose. Now, this Marshallian version or the Cambridge version, quantity theory of money, they said that total amount of money that a person wants to hold, person wants to have with him, is a fraction of total money generated, total output generated in the economy, and total value. If my total money demand is denoted by MD, it should be equal to KPY. This KPY is the value of output generated in the economy, or in a sense, essentially it's the nominal national income. Fraction of this national income is used for transaction purpose. If the total income of the economy is 1 lakh, then maybe a fraction of 1 lakh is kept by the people for transaction purpose. This is the demand for money. And as we know, as the income goes up, we have a positively sloping line with K as a fraction that is going to be kept as money for transaction purpose. So the proportion of income that would be optimal to hold in the form of money is assumed to be stable in the short run. This is what the Cambridge School said. So in equilibrium, exogenous supply of money must equal the quantity of money demanded, because what I said in my previous slide is that this is the money demand. But money demand is not the equilibrium. Equilibrium means this money demand should be equal to the money supply, and the money supply is given by only M, not MD, and MD stands for money demand. So this equilibrium means supply is equal to demand, and which should ideally be equal to KPY. And here you can see there is Y bar. Y bar means total amount of income or output is fixed in the economy. Now let us understand this by one example. Suppose in a country there is only one good, rice, which is to be exchanged for some purpose. If 2,000 quintals of rice is produced in the economy and the money issued in the economy is 25,000 and no credit is issued by the banks. Mind it, this no credit is issued by the bank means there is no savings from the government perspective. There is no deficit. This is called classical form of constraint. So whatever you produce, that is going to be spent now in this year or in this month. So in this framework, 2,000 quintals of rice and 25,000 rupees, what I am going to have is that if the velocity of money is 4 here, now the price of the rice per quintal is going to be 25,000 multiplied by 4. 4 is the velocity of money divided by 2,000. It comes down to rupees 50 per quintal. So in this system, you can think of the effect of change in money supply. If the money supply goes up to 50,000, and the quantity of rice remains same, then what is going to happen? If the money supply goes up, as I said before, if the money supply goes up, the price level must increase. And the same thing is happening here. Because of an increase in money supply, a quantity of money in the economy, the price level is going up from 50 to rupees 100. So here, now let us try to understand the whole thing. What is the intuitive explanation behind this thing? When money supply goes up, what I said from the numerical example, that the price level is going to go up. So when money supply increases, what is happening actually? The supply of money in the economy is becoming greater than the demand for money. So there is excess supply in the economy. If there is excess supply in the economy and I know that I need this much of money for my transaction purpose, but I have much more money now in the system. So this extra money is going to be used for the purpose of consumption, for the purpose of investment. Forget about the investment for the time being. If I use this extra money for the purpose of consumption, then I need to buy something. If I need to buy something, then there would be an excess demand for the goods and services produced there that are already produced, because I said that the total output produced in the economy is constant, which is given by KPY bar. So Y bar means total output in the economy is fixed. So as long as total output in the economy is fixed and more money is chasing few goods, then automatically this creates an excess demand for the goods and services produced in the system. So this excess demand for the goods and services will actually jack up the price. So this is the underlying explanation for the increase in the price level in this system of Cambridge approach to the quantity theory of money, where an increase in money supply pull up the price from a lower level to higher level to bring back the economy into the equilibrium situation. So the increased demand for commodities puts, as I said, increased demand for the commodities puts upward pressure on prices. And if output remains unchanged, this is very important classical assumption that the output is not changing here. So if the output changes, we might have slightly different result. So since the output is unchanged as it would be in the classical model and K remains constant, means the fraction of money I want to have to use for the transaction purpose I want to hold. Since this is constant, a new equilibrium will be reached only after the price level is doubled. And the new equilibrium, from the diagram you can see that the red line is shifting from left to right, and the new equilibrium is taking place at the point of intersection between the rightmost red line with the upward sloping black line indicating KPY and giving us two equilibrium points. On the vertical axis, the equilibrium points is P1, and the horizontal axis, the equilibrium point is M1. This means when money supply increases from M0 to M1, the price level is going to go up from P0 to P1. And now, if I look at this thing and elaborate much more on this thing, the formal equivalence of the Cambridge equation and Fisher's version of the equation of exchange that I explained before, one can easily check that there is essentially no such difference between these two concepts. And the money supply is M, and on the right hand side of this equation you can see there is a price level given by P and there is Y bar. In our previous slide or previous analysis, we mentioned is as small k. This small k is essentially the reflection of the velocity of money. This small k is 1 by v, or this v is equal to essentially 1 by k. For example, we can say that if the individual wish to hold an amount equal to 1/4 of the nominal income, say my nominal income is rupees 100 and I want to hold 1/4 of this nominal income, say rupees 25 in the form of money, because I believe that rupees 25 is good enough to meet my regular demands. In fact, the banking system also banks on this kind of philosophy that it may be the people are depositing 1 crore rupee in the bank, but bank knows that in one fine morning, all these people cannot come in the bank and can ask for the money to withdraw. So in one day, the usual thing is that maximum 25 lakhs may be withdrawn by the people. So bank is not going to have more than 25 lakh rupees with their hand for transaction purpose. The same thing is happening here. Where it is done by bank, now it is being done by the individual people. So here the velocity of money is going to be 4. So here what happens, as I mentioned, that k is equal to 1 by v, so k becomes 1 by 4. Where velocity is 4. Why? It is coming from how much money or how much fraction of nominal income we want to have for transaction purpose. So if we add these two things together, if we assimilate these two concepts of quantity theory of money, Fisherian version of quantity theory of money and Cambridge approach of quantity theory of money, essentially these two things are same. So Fisher's transaction approach lays stress much on the medium of exchange as the function of money, which we explained at the very beginning of this lecture, whereas the Cambridge economists or the Cambridge approach believed that the money acts both as a store of wealth and the medium of exchange. So almost these are the things that is explained in the classical school, the classical approach of quantity theory of money. And if we sum up all these things together, the bottom line is that from this demand for money 1 lecture, what we can have these 4 concrete points. One is equation of exchange is the main entry point of the quantity theory of money through the classical system. The main proponent of this classical system is Fisher. Fisher's version emphasizes more on the role of money as medium of exchange. And then comes the Cambridge version. This Cambridge version determines price level by assuming money market equilibrium where MD is equal to the money supply and K is assumed as fixed. And unlike Fisher, the point of departure from Fisher to Cambridge is that Cambridge economists believed that the money serves both as store of wealth and medium of exchange. So with this thing, the classical approach to the demand for money comes to an end. In the next lecture, we will focus on other alternative versions of demand for money. Thank you.